Hey, what's up, Eastown? So glad you could tune in with us. My name is Evan. I've had an opportunity to be with Eastown since the very beginning, and it has been an awesome journey to see how far things have come since the beginning and the track that we were on. It is super exciting to be a part of where Eastown is going. Now, maybe this is your first time. Maybe you've watched the online service a lot. One thing we'd really love for you to do is to check in with us so that we know you're there. We'd love to get connected with you. So text Eastown to 94000. That's 3 zeros, 94000, and check in with us. We'd, again, love to know that you are there, love to connect with you. Another opportunity we have to connect with you is coming up next weekend, and that's our Father's Day celebration. We are having an epic Father's Day. There is going to be a dunk tank. I think there's going to be some kind of Chicago-styled hot dog going on, and just a lot of fun ways to celebrate dads and all they do. And so come out next week to Eastown. We're at Iron Horse Middle School in San Ramon, and we would love to connect with you in that way as well. Now, we have started off a new series this summer called Summer for the Soul. Don't confuse it with Summer of Soul, which is a really great documentary, 10 out of 10 would recommend. But we are deep diving into our souls, what that is, and how to care for them. So last week, Clint did a deep dive into the soul, what the soul is, and how we can care, and how important it is to care for our souls. And I know in my own life, a lot of times I let this go, and I don't work on caring for myself, and I'm just so busy trying to do all of the things that life has to offer, to be the best at my job, to give all to that, to give all to my family. And what ends up happening is I experience frustration, I emotional unhealth, I'm anxious, I just feel a lot of frustration a lot of times. So my little bit of a personal story, my wife and I in this past year started fostering. And before you're like, oh, that's awesome, it has been really one of the most challenging things that I have ever done. And I find myself getting frustrated or getting anxious or getting emotionally kind of torn back and forth in this battle about this 1-year-old little boy. And I'm like, why is there so much going on here in my life? And I realize as those frustrations mount, or as that anxiety mounts around this, I realize so much of it has to do with the fact that I'm trying to do this under my own power. I'm trying to do this, and my soul is almost unable to kind of deal with this because I'm not dealing with it in a healthy spiritual way. And so these like indicators of frustration or exhaustion or a lack of peace is actually our soul's way of letting us know that something is off. And so it's almost like, I usually leave mine on when I'm driving. But in the car, there's that indicator light that says like, hey, like check engine. When you're feeling those feelings of frustration or a lack of peace, a lot of that in the ways is that check engine light coming on for your soul to say, hey, I need to be cared for. I need to kind of almost have a break. Because here's the thing, God designed us. He designed our mind, our body, our spirit, and our soul. And he designed us in a very specific way. And our soul desires joy and peace and love and satisfaction and delight. And the way that he designed it is for our souls to actually find these things in God alone. That he is like the truest source of our satisfaction. He is where joy comes from. But a lot of times what ends up happening is we think we can do it our own way. And we think we can find joy or peace or satisfaction in our workplace. We can find it in our family. We can find it in the achievements that we do. This is like straight up beginning of the Bible, Adam and Eve type stuff, because that's really what happened. God set it up and said, hey, here's like kind of the parameters, not just to give you the rules to keep you structured and to say like, hey, you can't do this and you need to do this, but because God had this ultimate design because he knew what their souls needed. And like I do a lot of times in my life, Adam and Eve said, hey, you know what? I think I've got a better idea. I think I've got a better way to do this. And so we try this, right, in our own lives. And we say, hey, I'm going to take control of that because I think I know what's best. And in my own life, I try to like do all of the things that I can. I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. And in a lot of ways, I'm like, okay, if I just have all of these experiences, if I travel to all the countries and I do all of the things and I just experience all that life has to offer, I'll find peace and joy. But what it ends up being is that what I'm trying to do is I'm really just end up chasing the next high or chasing that next experience or chasing that next thing. And there's no satisfaction or joy or peace in those things. And my soul is crying out for these things. Our souls want these things. But our souls are not going to find what they're looking for unless we place that in Jesus. Jesus is the only one who can provide these things in our lives. Peace in spite of a bad day at work. Joy in spite of a rough prognosis. Love in the face of hate. Our soul wants these things and can do these things through the power of Jesus in our lives. Jesus offers us rest and respite from the world, a world where the chase feels like it's never over, right? Where you feel like you're in the rat race and you can't get out, where keeping up with everybody else has just left you feeling really empty. There is joy and satisfaction and fulfillment in following Jesus. And choosing to follow Jesus is really the most important decision that you can make. And what's amazing is what Jesus knows will come when we do. There's a verse in John chapter 10 in the Bible, in the New Testament, and Jesus is talking and he's really saying the reason why he came. And he says, I have come that you may have life and you have it more abundantly. That's really what the takeaway I want you to get today is that following Jesus, there's abundant life there, but it's a journey. Following Jesus is this commitment that you make, this moment, right? Because here's the thing, like that sounds amazing. I want abundant life, but I want it like right now. And I usually don't want to put any kind of work or effort into it. I just kind of want it like, hey, yeah, great. I'll take Jesus and then I'll have everything great. But that's really not how it works, right? Committing to Jesus is like commitment to a journey, like this really important step. But rather than a moment in time, it's really the beginning of something new in your life. So this past week, I hiked Mount Whitney with a couple friends of mine. It's a super, super high peak down in the Eastern Sierras in California. It's over 14,000 feet high, and the hike is like 23 miles long. And so I had a lot of time, not just to appreciate the beauty of nature and curse the switchbacks going up the hill, but also just to think about all kind of the parallels between this hike and our actual spiritual journey when we begin to follow Jesus. There's actually there's a biblical comparison here where the author of Hebrews, which is in the New Testament, actually talks about our spiritual journey as running a race, right? And you can think of that almost in a hike as well. In Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, it says this, therefore, since we're surrounded by this huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. And so as we make that commitment to begin to follow Jesus, it really is that start of a journey, that start of a hike, that starting line of a race where we say, I'm in, I'm doing this, I've begun, right? But then like I'm saying, is it begins this journey that you're on. And I recently read this book by Belden Lane called Backpacking with the Saints. And he outlines this journey with 4 Ds. And I really like alliteration and I really like hiking. So I thought this would be pretty cool. And so the first step that he talks about is this idea of departure. Now, I could have planned for a really long time to hike that mountain. I could have read all the reports. I could have looked at all the pictures of other people doing it. I could have dreamt about what it would be like to get to the top at some point. And I could have just done all of those things, but there comes a point where I have to put the pack on my back and start. I've got to get going. And in a spiritual sense, that commitment to Jesus, that saying like, hey, I choose to follow Jesus is our taking off. It's giving up on what the world has to offer and saying, hey, I'm going to follow you instead. Check out this verse from Paul in Romans. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. Let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. We depart what we know isn't feeding our soul, right? We know, hey, I'm not going to find that peace, that joy, that satisfaction over here. And so I'm going to choose to commit to follow Jesus with everything I have and head out on this quest to find that fulfillment in my Creator. The second of the alliterative 4 Ds is this idea of discipline. This is really what we're focusing on this summer, is the practices or the disciplines. And I get it. Like sometimes I have a negative connotation with the word discipline. I just think I'm in trouble again, like I was for the majority of my middle school and high school career. But really what it means is this idea is really actually very simple. The discipline is what makes you better at what you're doing. If you're really into sports, no matter what sport you're into, those athletes, those professionals are incredibly disciplined at what they do. Steph Curry is not one of the world's greatest shooters of all time because it just came upon him one day, or he decided, hey, I'm going to work on being a great shooter. He puts hours and hours and hours of time and effort and practice into his craft, thus becoming one of the greatest shooters, right? In the arts, musicians and artists practice their craft regularly to continue to improve. And our spiritual life has so many parallels with that. Look at this verse from 1 Timothy. And in chapter 4, verse 7 and 8, it says, workouts in the gym are useful, but a disciplined life in God is far more so, making you fit both today and forever. You can count on this. Take it to heart. Now, the disciplines are really great. These practices, they're really, really helpful. And in his book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer actually uses a parallel or an image of a wine trellis. Now, if you've ever been to Napa, you see those rows, or maybe Livermore, you see those rows and rows of at the wineries of all of the grapes, right? But they're built up on these kind of wooden wine trellises. And what they do is they allow for the most growth and the most maximum growth of those grapes to make the best wine. Now, could those grow just kind of on the ground? Maybe, but they wouldn't grow super well. But those trellises, they kind of support that growth. And the disciplines or the practices in our life do the exact same thing. They provide us some structure to kind of have that most positive growth. Examples of disciplines are things like prayer, which we're going to look at this month. There are things like fasting, which we've talked about here at Eastown before. Things like Sabbath, rest, silence and solitude. There's many different examples of ways, these disciplines or practices, that you can better connect with your Creator, right? And these practices, they're not, please hear me, they're not to earn the love or the grace of Jesus in your life. You have that whether you like it or not. These are just to better foster that relationship with Him. Because our soul, again, longs for that. And you have to put these practices in place to almost best maximize that relationship, to best foster that growth with Jesus. Now, the third D is descend. And I'm going to shoot straight with you. There were a few times where I was hiking, and there were a few times where I ran some races, and I get to this point and I just don't want to do it anymore. I get to this point where it's really, really difficult. And so there were a few these long inclines where I couldn't see where I was going. It was getting dark, or earlier in the day, it was super hot. And I really wanted to turn back. I wanted to give up. And marathoners, when they're running, they call this part the wall. I usually call it the dark place. And I'll tell my friends, hey, I'm in the dark place. And we'll try to, maybe take a break or something like that. But spiritually speaking, there's a lot of parallels with that as well. There are going to be times in our journey of following Jesus, even when we implement these practices, where it doesn't feel like we're necessarily hearing from God. There'll be times where it feels like you're just going through routines, where you're trying to implement some of the disciplines or the practices, and it maybe feels empty. There'll be times when you're trying to pray, and it just feels like you're talking to the ceiling, or you're just kind of on your own. And that time, that descent, or that kind of the dark place, isn't uncommon. Even some of the great spiritual leaders of the Bible experience this. David in the Psalms, he says this in Psalm 13, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me?" This is from a king who was considered really close to God. And even at times, he didn't feel this kind of spiritual high, or he didn't, feel God's presence every moment in his life. There were times where he was in the dark place. But one thing I know in my life is that those are often the times where God can teach me something that I cannot hear or cannot experience when things are just going really well. And so my encouragement to you, my challenge to you is, in those times, lean into what God is teaching you. Lean into what He has for you. Because what ends up happening when we do is that we enter into the fourth phase, or the fourth D, and that is delight. And I'll be honest, like, there is not a better view than when you finish the hike. When you're at the top of the mountain, you can see everything. You begin to see, oh, look how far I've come. Look at the journey that I've made. Look at the progress that I've come along in this journey. When we push through that wall, when we push through the dark place, when we lean into what God has for us and let him teach us things through that, the end is often delight. You begin to realize that God was maybe taking something away or changing something in us for the better. There are a lot of times where I think, I know what's best for me. Like, this is the path forward in my life. And there have been times where God has kind of switched gears on me and I have not been thrilled about it. I'll just be honest with you. I've been frustrated. I've questioned him. A great example of this is I used to live with my wife in China, and we decided to move back, and I wanted nothing to do with it. I was like, God, why would you put that in her heart that she wants to move back? I don't ever want to move back. I'm going to stay here forever. I loved my job. I loved the community I was in. And I thought to myself, I was so down. I was so like, no, there's no way this can work out for the better. And now at this point, hindsight being 2020, I look back and I see that God had his hand and actually had something better for me, was actually protecting me from things and had something so much greater for me. And I'm thankful to God now as I look back. But in those moments, it's not always that way. As you navigate this journey, these 4 Ds of departures and disciplines and descent and delight, there'll be times where you actually rotate back and forth between descent and delight. There will be times where things are difficult. Jesus does not promise that it will just be this easy road, but he does promise that he will never leave you alone, that he will not abandon you in those times of need, and he won't abandon you when you're in the delight phase as well. As you navigate this journey, this is what will bring your soul peace and rest, is really, really practicing those disciplines and realizing what Jesus has for you. Now, this month, we're actually going to be focusing on prayer and as a spiritual practice. And more specifically, we're going to be looking at what's called the prayer of examine. And I'll jump in a little bit more with the prayer of examine towards the end. But I want to just give you maybe some encouragement around the idea of prayer. I grew up in a pretty strict conservative church, and people used to pray for like a really long time. I remember my mind would wander and my mind would think, oh, I'm never going to be able to pray like that. They use kind of all these really, really big words. And I got kind of a disconnect with prayer in my own life because I just thought, I'm not going to even try because I'll never get to that level. And I just need you to understand that there is no levels with prayer. Prayer is a conversation with God. There's actually a verse in the Bible that says, pray without ceasing. And when I was younger, I kind of freaked me out because I was like, but I don't have any time for anything else. Like, what if I want to play basketball or something like that? But I was missing the point. And really the idea is that you're in this kind of consistent communication, this conversation loop with Jesus, with your creator, where you're throwing ideas out. You're saying, hey, where did I see you? Thank you for this. God, help me in this moment. Really, I walk into a meeting, I'm like, God, give me peace. I'm on my way home. God, give me patience with my children, which I don't always excel at. And that's that idea of praying without ceasing, that I'm in this constant communication loop with my creator. Now, the prayer of examine specifically actually is this kind of daily practice that gives us an opportunity to take a beat, to slow down, and see where God has moved and worked. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes I get going in the pace of a day or in the pace of a week or in the pace of a month, and I don't do a whole lot of reflection in my life. I just kind of get to the end of the day and I'm like, okay, a day's done. Let's see what's next, and let's see what's next, and let's see what's next. But the prayer of examine gives me an opportunity to pause, to look back on my day and see God. Because I have missed so many moments by not doing this, where I saw God do something actually really cool. And so what I'm going to do, and if you're at home, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you're home, you can close your eyes. But what I want you to do is take a deep breath, because we're gonna kind of walk through the prayer of examine together. And I'm going to kind of pause after each point for you to kind of engage in this. Now, again, if you're driving, no need to close your eyes. If you're at home, you can pause. You can pause if you're listening on the podcast and just take a moment to kind of work through each one of these prompts. So if you're, sitting in your car, you're at home, you're in the office, just kind of take a big deep breath, kind of relax your shoulders, maybe set your phone aside for a little bit, turn off those notifications, kind of plant your feet on the ground, close your eyes, and let's work through this prayer of examine together. First one is offer. Offer yourself and this time to God. One way you might do this is to say, God, I'm up for anything. God, I'm here for what you might have. The second point of the prayer of examine is to reflect. And here's an opportunity to reflect back on your day, one period after another. Sit and think about maybe what your expectations were, how things turned out, how you reacted. Maybe it's the morning rush of getting the kids. Maybe it's on your way to the office. Maybe it's in that meeting. The third point is to ask, and that's to ask how God has concretely and uniquely loved you today. The giver is in the gift. Thank him for the meal, the moments, the people, the circumstances. Maybe you crossed paths with someone you normally wouldn't. Maybe you had a conversation that you normally wouldn't have the opportunity to have had. Thank God for those moments and ask him how he loved you today. Next point is to notice. Notice when you felt distant from, maybe resistant to, maybe even simply unaware of God's love for you today. Give these reflections to God and ask for grace to receive his love more freely tomorrow. Maybe there was a moment where you got frustrated. Maybe there was a moment where you grasped for control. And offer these up to God. Understand that he has grace and love for you despite mistakes. The last of the prompts in the prayer of examine is to question. Ask yourself, how did your awareness of God's love for you affect the way you interacted with others, your circumstances, and yourself today? What this looks like practically is to say, hey, knowing that God loves me, how did I communicate and show that love to others in my day? Like I said at the beginning, the prayer of examine is an excellent way to just take a few moments at the end of your day and see where God has worked. As you begin to do this, it is a practice. It will take effort. It may not be perfect every time, but you will grow in this and you will begin to see that God is working in your life, that God desires to hear from you and wants to show you how much he loves you and cares for you and has grace for you. Continue to practice the prayer of examine in your daily life. My encouragement, my challenge to you, and see what God is doing. Maybe keep a journal, maybe in the phone, on your notes app, and celebrate how God is doing amazing things in your life. The band is going to play a song now, and band, thank you so much for using your talents for this. And as they're playing, I'd encourage you to close your eyes and ask God to show you and to make very clear to you not only his love, but what he wants to do in and through you through this practice of prayer over the next month. How he wants to restore your soul in this crazy, crazy world. God loves each and every one of you so much and wants you to find that peace, that joy, that satisfaction in him.
Hello, Eastown. Let's sing this song together of comfort and peace, knowing that God is with us. You are matchless in grace and mercy. There is nowhere we can hide from your love. You are steadfast, never failing. You are faithful. All creation is in awe of who you are. You're the healer of the sick and the broken. You are comfort to every heart in loss. Our King, our Savior forever. For eternity, we will sing of all you've done. For eternity, we will sing of all you've done. We sing, God with us, God for us. Nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us. Nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. Your heart, it moves with compassion. There is life, there is healing in your love. You're the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. For eternity, we will sing of all you've done. And we sing, God with us, God for us. Nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. God with us, God for us. Nothing can come against, no one can stand between us. Where there was fear, you brought courage. When I was afraid, you were with me, and you lifted me up, lifted me up. Where there was death, you brought life, Lord. Where there was fear, you brought courage. When I was afraid, you were with me, and you lifted me up, lifted me up. between us. God with us, God for us. Nothing can come against, no one can stand between us.
Band, thank you so much. Everybody at home, listening, podcast, driving, at work, thank you so much for tuning in with us. We love, love, love that we still have this ability to do this online piece and have an online presence. But please know too that we would love to meet you and see you in person. If you didn't check in at the beginning, you can still do that now. Text Eastown to 94000. Or next week, come to our epic Father's Day celebration. But I need you to know there are so many pieces that come together to make all of this happen. From the people behind the scenes, all of the things that we love to do to reach out to our community, love local. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that make Eastown go. And we would love for you to be a part of that. And one way that you can is through the practice or the discipline of giving. And so go to easttown.church/give, Give, to give and be a part of what we're doing here. Not only is it amazing to give to what Eastown is doing right here in the East Bay, but it also does something amazing for your soul when you begin to give to what God is doing in our community and in our world. Eastown, have a wonderful week. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing you perhaps at Epic Father's Day or another Sunday.